Okay.
It is 4:05 and we have 16 participants, which seems to be a full house, at least for summertime. So I would suggest we get started and not wait for anyone else to show up, if nobody has any objection to that.
I'm good.
Okay. I'm doing a quick survey, a quick look at who we have here to see if there's anybody who is new. If there's anybody that's new, raise your virtual hand, speak out and say, I want to introduce myself. No?
I'm new. I don't have a clue how to raise my virtual hand, so
You
Sorry.
just did.
I'm looking. I can't find it. So I'm Kay Chopard. I am the new executive director at the Kantara Initiative.
Welcome. You're honored.
Thank you. But I have worked with Stewards for Change on other issues and topics, and I had a long conversation with Daniel Stein, and that's kind of how he introduced me to the group and a little bit about what all you are doing. So I'm just here to listen and learn for now, but thank you for allowing me to join you.
Nice to meet you.
Indeed, welcome.
I think
Well-
I've introduced myself before too. I'm Sarah Zaporta, cloud engineer of May June. Dave knows me.
Hey, Sarah.
Yep, him and I have been working together, and the presentation that we're going to show you today is the work of him and myself. So very happy to meet you all.
We're delighted to have you here, Sarah, and of course, Dave as well.
Sorry, I'm draped in shadow. It's the way I, operate. So
I don't know, Brian. Sarah, yes. Dave, not so much.
I knew that was coming, Tom.
sorry, Dave.
No dissing the colleagues here. No dissing the colleagues.
Dave, she teed you right up, didn't she?
Yes, yes.
Well, Amanda, would you like to talk about the news and announcements? Because it's your weekly roundup, not mine.
Yeah, so I just added a couple of highlighted articles that I sent out this week. If you're not getting the weekly roundup, please let me know. I usually send them out on Friday. You can also check it out by opening the agenda I sent yesterday and just using the link right here. I added the HIMSS conference per Jim's request. I don't know if he's on this call or not, but he had
Howdy,
sent an
y'all.
email saying that
Jim is
he
here.
was, yes,
Yep.
he's going to be attending and is curious if others are going to be going.
Yeah, I just figured now was a good time to ask to see who was going. So,
I'll be there digitally, but not in person, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or fortunately, I mean, HIMSS in Las Vegas in the summertime is like, the worst possible conference on earth.
I've been to a conference. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, do they still do the interoperability showcase at HIMSS?
Yes.
Super.
It's actually grown, Dave. It's a lot bigger than it used to be.
Yeah, I don't know what used to be necessarily entails. This year is going to be interesting because we're on a whole new floor plan, and I actually just volunteered to assist in moderating a couple panel sessions at a symposium because the moderator isn't going to be able to make any more. So the dynamics for attendance are changing kind of rapidly. But it's in Caesars this year instead of traditionally living in the Venetian like it always has been. So
Okay.
Has it shrunk significantly because of pandemic and other challenges?
Brian, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question.
Has the conference shrunk as a consequence of the pandemic and just the logistics associated with trying to pull something together so last minute?
Great question. Yeah, so they have a fairly expansive floor plan in the Caesars Forum and Conference Center in lieu of going into the Venetian. I haven't confirmed this, but my thought is that someone else had the Venetian booked for August, so they ended up going to Caesars, though they're still leveraging Venetian room blocks and some of the other stuff over at the Venetian. In terms of attendance, I know it ain't going to be anywhere close to the 40,000 people they normally get. But it's kind of a head scratcher at the moment as to how many people to expect. I have made connections with various people that I know are going, as well as booths that they're going to have. So it should be very interesting to see who shows up.
Well, excellent.
But I suspect from the Discord that I might be the only person there, so happily to represent.
We will lean on you as our representative there.
Indeed, sir, I shall shoulder that burden happily.
No, we're not that big a group. It's not like we're going to weigh heavily on your shoulders.
Great, thanks, Amanda.
Well, actually, maybe it's a to-do for us. I don't know if we have such aspirations, but we've been doing a lot of piloting and proofs of concept and things like that. It might be worth considering a spot in the interoperability showcase one of these days at HIMSS.
I would really agree with that, Tom.
Me too.
The TAC had done that, I think, 3 times, something like that. And the quality of people that you got at the podium or the booth that you were at and so forth was really, really good.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to serve back in the day. I used to serve as docent through the showcase, and it's just every year there's just so many innovations that are being brought to the table, and it's an excellent way to bring visibility to it.
Yeah, and interoperability, I mean, that's its namesake. So we should fit right in there.
When's the next one? Is there another one in Boston coming up in 6 months or so?
Yeah, Health Boston is in October.
Perhaps we should be considering trying to do something there. Of course, that's a bit challenging to pull something together in that time frame.
Yeah, I don't know if we'd be ready this year, Brian, but it might be something to think about for going forward.
Is there something in the the winter time, January, February, March kind of thing?
I think March is HIMSS 22. Let me look. Yeah, March is HIMSS 22, 14th through the 18th.
Again in Las Vegas?
Orlando.
Orlando. Well, still hot and now muggy instead of dry, but all right.
Well,
Actually, it's
should be
quite nice
beautiful.
in March.
Yeah.
To be down there. Yeah. That's an even bigger venue.
The worst part is that the air temperature is perfect, but the pools are still chilly.
Okay, well, it sounds like we've got a plan here. Now we just have to figure out how we're going to follow through on it. We need to do a proof of concept and pull it together in time to go to Orlando with it in March. Okay. Well, shall we move on to working group status? Okay, no objection. I will, in the absence of Adam and or Daniel, I'm just quickly looking over the list of participants, making sure that I'm not stepping on Adam's toes or tongue here. The consent governance working group continues to move apace, but we now need members of the consent governance teams to step up to the plate. And Amanda, I'm going to take over the screen sharing here just for a moment. And work plan for consent scan project. Can you all see this work plan for consent scan?
Certainly can.
Yep.
Okay, well, good, because it was way off to the right-hand side of my incredibly wide screen. And I was worried that it would just sort of disappear on you.
Nope, right in front of my eyes.
In any case, well, there it is. So what Adam has done is he has taken the original outline for this scan report, and he's fleshed it out. And we can skip over all this, deadlines and timeline stuff. Oh, shoot. In fact, I'm not looking at the version that I needed to look at. And I've already kind of screwed up something on my screen here. So hang on just a moment.
You need the draft, right, Brian?
Yeah, do you have the draft right in front of you?
I do.
Thank you. You can share.
Okay, hold on just a second. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's what I was
Yes.
looking for. I just wanted to, Amanda, I just wanted to scroll through that and point out that Adam has filled in a lot of stuff, a lot of basic content.
Yes, tonight.
But we need to now contribute a lot of information on the specifics of legal, of technology. I've already pulled together a bunch of stuff for consent technology that I can drop into it. I just haven't had a chance yet because of other commitments. But we need everybody to everybody at least who's on this, on one of these working teams, to kind of dive in, roll up their sleeves and contribute. And just for the technology folks, wanted to let you know that what Eric and I had done a few weeks back was we had created a kind of umbrella consent technologies document that documented every microservice that we could identify within consent to share and the San Diego CDS LEAP project, and wrote them down. And all I really need to do is to have a moment or two to drag and drop them into the document, and then have at them like like a flock of piranhas. No, it's a school of piranhas, isn't it?
Think.
So just to talk about the legal stuff for a second, Jennifer Bernstein and I spoke, I think yesterday or so, and whenever who's scrolling gets down to the legal thing, the legal section, you'll see that it's really skeletal. But the question I have is, there you go, ding, ding, ding. For this document, for its current purpose or current use, it was to make sure that we were in agreement about what the goals for this were, right? So is the idea of adding more to the legal considerations now, starting to add in findings or recommendations? Because we have not yet done that work. That's the work that we're doing now. What's listed as legal considerations right now are, basically the tasks of what we're going to be doing. So I just wanted a little more clarity on that, because I know Adam has asked for us to beef it up, but I wasn't sure what to add beef to, or what beef to add. Do you have any feedback, Brian?
Well, the question becomes, number one, for healthcare protected information, what are the requirements? This is well understood, but what are the requirements for protecting healthcare information under the guise of treatment, TPO? What are the exceptions that are important, like 42 CFR Part 2, where TPO doesn't necessarily directly apply? What other exceptions might exist where someone can share information, whether it's break the glass in protection, or if you want, and I know, Christine, I've shared with you my HIPAA and my NEAM Health security and privacy white paper that listed the 16 some odd different specific exceptions within the HIPAA regulations. So there are a number of them that may apply to our particular circumstances. But then there's also the question of, okay, FERPA, how do we document what the requirements
Right.
are for protecting information based on FERPA? How does that relate
Right. So
to HIPAA? And we also have a white paper on that. So, I mean, that's basically the stuff that we need to turn around and turn into pros for the Pew Charitable Trust or whoever is funding this thing.
How many pages are we looking to devote to that subject, Brian?
As many as you need.
Unfortunately, it may be a lot because there are a lot of variations. I mean, you know, there's the federal laws and then there's all the variations in state and local areas.
And it may be that what we say is, you know, there are also, you know, we keep it pithy and say there are also exceptions within individual states, or we keep it pithy plus and, you know, say there are exceptions within each and every state, and then, you know, have a bulleted list. Or, you know, if somebody wants to go whole hog and document the full set of exceptions associated with each and every state and local set of laws, it could be a marvelous appendix for it all. And I know that I think for Christine and for Jennifer, I think I sent along I think it was a spreadsheet that had originally been created as part of the Federal Health Architecture Program that listed the phenomenal, you know, long list of all of the state and local laws that might apply to healthcare legal considerations. And if you guys didn't,
so Brian, sorry, go ahead.
no, go.
Oh, okay. So when I'm hearing this, you know, some of this should just be referenced, right? That these documents exist. And how do we really identify where the sweet spot is that where we're contributing something new?
Right.
And
Well,
added,
if I understood our assignment, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, adding to that, this is a scan, right? So
Yeah.
I thought the intent of this was to do a scan for who has already pulled this information together and present that, but that we expect that there will be additional work to happen, because while we know that in healthcare, there are documents that exist that have done a really good job of already, doing that work. We doubt that there's any document that has pulled all of it together, all the various domains. And I thought that was the purpose of this, was to capture what's already out there in order to inform the next steps, which would be, okay, now that we know what's out there, what is our next step? But I didn't think we were necessarily doing analysis at this stage, but point me in the point.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's what I understood as well. I think the artifacts that we're collecting now in the environmental scan and we're doing now in the interviews and things, I think is to identify a set of artifacts, but I don't think we would repeat those artifacts here. I think we would refer to those in endnotes or bibliography or footnotes or whatever, and speak to the key considerations in the document as to, like it says here, identify, mention impediments to progress. That's probably some level of findings that we have as a scan of that material. And some of those things have been well voiced in some of the interviews so far. But I wouldn't think that would be helpful for us or the reader to regurgitate all that material in this document. I think if it's, to your point, Brian, if you have that document that lists all of the variations of state law, that would be a helpful bibliography entry, or a reference section for someone to click on and read at their leisure. But the point of this document is we've got 20 some artifacts that we've looked at. We've talked to 30 some people, and here are kind of the core nuggets that you need to know about it, both good and bad. Does that make sense?
And I, as those of you who are noticing Amanda's screen, I have sent at least 3 of those documents off to Amanda to be filed away appropriately, referenced within the consent scan resources spreadsheet, wherever. And I know I've copied this to various members of the consent scan legal team. So your challenge is not necessarily to list everything that's in those documents, but maybe to provide some reasoned description of the challenges associated with dealing with consent across both the federal and state landscape.
Methinks the legal team needs a meeting. And if I remember correctly, Paul and Tom, I don't know if you go by Tom or Thomas, and one other person had indicated interest besides Jennifer and me on that committee. So
I believe it was Kim.
Okay.
Jung Kim. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest.
Unfortunately, just had a fire drill at work, and he can't participate today. All things in time.
So I'm just going to suggest to Paul and Tom, just if we want to take this conversation out of this meeting, and should we try and have a brief discussion in the next, hopefully this week, maybe? Yay, nay?
Yeah, it would be helpful, but I think we also probably need to, we can either make some sausage and then go to talk to Daniel and Adam about, are we in the right place? Or we can have a discussion with them first and then confer as to what we would do, knowing what guidance they've given us. That's, we can play it either way.
Yeah, it works for me. I'm just looking at my calendar. We could do something Friday afternoon.
If I were you guys, given that Daniel and Adam are on vacation, make some sausage and then display it to them and say, what recipe would you like us to make with this sausage?
All right. So Paul, Paul, what time Friday afternoon were you thinking? And Tom, are you also free at that time?
After 2:00.
Tom, you get to bid and then we'll take it off of this call. All right, I'll chat with you guys online.
I was just looking at my calendar. I can do anytime Friday afternoon,
Okay.
except for 3:00, 3 to 3:30. And so 2:00 or 4, either one will work.
2:00 Eastern time it is. I'll follow up with each of you
And Jennifer.
and Jennifer.
Right.
Amanda, I would assert that we have met, if not exceeded, Adam's original intent for us to represent him in this meeting.
Yeah, the only other thing that I wanted to just note is that in case you didn't see it, the consent governance meeting needs to be rescheduled. So the one that was originally scheduled for tomorrow, I sent out a cancellation and sent out a new doodle poll. We're going to try to reschedule for either later next week or the week after. So please try to respond to that by end of week this Friday.
Okay, Amanda, I believe that the next thing on our list, unless anybody has anything that they want to say about any of the other working groups, it is the summertime and folks have been busy, folks have been on vacation, etc. So we're not trying to get too hard-nosed about getting reports from organizations that may not have met. But we also don't want to exclude anybody that wants to speak up. And in the absence of anybody speaking up, Amanda, can you turn control over to our feature topic of the day, which is Dave and Sarah talking about patient matching. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Sure. All right.
All right, hold on a second. Okay. All right, I made each of you co-hosts, so you should be able to share your screens.
Wonderful. Can you see my screen? Sensing proof of concept?
Yes.
All right, I'm just gonna head straight to the presentation. So if everyone can see this, I was just going to continue.
So Sarah, can I give just a tad of introduction here?
Absolutely. This is, after all, by Dave Walsh and Sarah Zaporta.
Yeah. So I know a lot of the people on the call, and I've been involved in Project Unify really since its inception. The couple of areas that I've been focused on is the user experience piece of it, which on a subsequent meeting, we're going to have a presentation on that, but also the person matching. So most of last year, we had Pradeep and Rita presenting really at a conceptual level what person matching is and so forth. Sarah Zaporta is here. She works with me at a company that is a startup at this point. And she has taken on the effort of doing a proof of concept implementation for person matching. So Sarah, with that, can you go ahead?
Absolutely. That's a nice act to follow. Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
So yes, as David mentioned, I am the cloud engineer, cloud person, as I like to say, of May, June. And as a result, a lot of this proof of concept has been deployed in the cloud, and I will get to that in a later slide. But before I start, are there any questions? Zero questions for now? All right, cool. I'm glad to see I haven't confused anyone so far. So yes, welcome to the Sensing proof of concept. So to start off, we are going to first ask ourselves, what is entity resolution? Now that is a big problem in person matching that we face. So entity resolution refers to the process of defining records across multiple data sets. Now, as customer data may exist in multiple manifestations across multiple systems, this presents a challenge to find all relevant records that link to a single entity. So think about if you are in a database and you see one name that shows up multiple times in multiple rows because the address was slightly different, or the address and the driver's license was slightly different. In here, a single entity might have multiple records, and within those multiple records exist multiple fields, and within those multiple fields, there's differing information. So cardinality of one to many for a single entity with multiple records is already kind of, a lot, but then you add to the multiple records, then multiple fields, and then you have differing information. And as you can expect with rapid growth of data sets, the problems associated with the semantic relationship between entities thus increases proportionately to the increase of the data set size. And to kind of sort this problem out in what is entity resolution and how can we kind of help that process, in the spirit of Jeopardy, I'll ask another question. Oops, sorry. What is sensing? But to further kind of go into the point of entity resolution, for instance, you have these two nodes, which represent these two blue nodes, which represent in document. Oh, sorry, I just got an admit. There we go. Just admitted someone new to the meeting. Welcome. So I was just talking about entity resolution and why it's a problem with ballooning data sets. And here's a small example of Elvis, aka the King Presley, and Memphis, which these two blue nodes represent in-document extracted entities. So amongst those, you see different types of data being shown here with Saint Elvis, for instance. So you have multiple instances of Elvis occurring. Now, there's a big difference between Saint Elvis, pre-patrician saint of Ireland, born in Munster, versus Elvis Presley, aka the King, born in Memphis, Tennessee. And you can see that these entities resolve to the type. So Elvis, Saint Elvis, and Elvis Presley resolve to type person. And thus you have origin also from Memphis to location. So is there any questions at the moment with this illustration or entity resolution? No? All right, with that, I'll continue. So getting to what is sensing and a possible solution for entity resolution problems. Sensing software is the first real-time purpose-built artificial intelligence for entity resolution. This basically autonomously discovers common entities and relationships within your data to provide you with a complete inventory of every record related to each person and company. So basically via machine learning, the AI in sensing learns through experience and improves over time. And sensing software does make this easy and affordable. For the first proof of concept, you're able to actually do 100K records to test this with your own data sets, and it's free. So you can actually just test this out and see customer views while reducing false positives and false negatives. Now, why would you use sensing to resolve your entity resolution woes? Well, first and foremost, cost savings. Fewer analysts are acquired as false positives are reduced by up to 90%, and you don't need any entity resolution expertise to train, tune, and manage your deployment. There are fewer engineering resources that are required to cleanse, prepare, and label data, and it's affordably priced up to 1/10 the cost of alternatives. And the technical support with sensing I have experienced, it is wonderful. I cannot say that lightly enough. It's amazing. And if there are any questions about using sensing, I can definitely connect you to the representative that David and I have spoken with. and she's wonderful herself, and she can direct you to anyone in technical support that you would like to speak to.
Sarah, can I interject one little thing?
Of course.
One of the reasons why we selected sensing for our initial proof of concept was that their sweet spot is really in the multiple domain world. So as we start to go down the social determinants of health, education, all of the other programs, and healthcare, we're really looking at entity matching across numerous domains to come up with the matches and so forth. So that was the rationale behind selecting sensing, was the multi-domain perspective.
Yes, you're able to have multiple data sets and compare and contrast through that. And that's one of, yeah, to Dave's point, that is one of the best features of sensing, besides the aforementioned cost. So the second point, besides cost savings, is better outcomes. It typically produces superior results to homegrown and other commercial ER systems. And another benefit to it is there's culturally aware name matching, entity-centric learning, and non-obvious relationship awareness that are available in sensing software. And also, don't forget the competitive advantages that it allows organizations to more easily innovate and leapfrog the competition. So that continue to the architecture, and to Dave's point, you like the data sources, as you can see here, you have different and disparate data sources. So customers, vendors, watch lists, third parties, anything else you could think of, including custom such as fire data or HL7 or anything you can think of really. Through there, it's transformed, and I'll explain it in the next slide a little better, via the sensing generic entity specification. You map and transform it and then feed it into an ingest queue, which then feeds it into the sensing SDK. And from there, you can then visualize it via query or dashboarding software, or in data stores. Let me just go to the next. Are there any questions about this before I continue? I'm going to explain the sensing architecture a bit more in the next slide, but in the meantime, is there any confusion about anything I've said so far? My apologies if I speak fast. I've had a lot of caffeine today.
Is there any, I'm always interested in consent. So are you going to cover that?
In terms of, oops, your data doesn't exactly reach, so I'm sorry, consent, if like consent with patients and their data going into some other store, is that what the question is? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So to the best of my knowledge, sensing actually doesn't see this information. This is all present within your data store. This information doesn't get up to sensing servers. It stays within any data store that you've set up. So now I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, yeah, that's good. Let's keep going.
I have a quick question. Hi. Thanks for the presentation. My name is Matt.
Hi, Matt.
It says sensing relational database. Does it also support NoSQL databases or RDF databases?
Yes, I believe you can support NoSQL. I believe that is covered in, yes. So you can use SQL, NoSQL, Hadoop. In terms of data store, you can use Elasticsearch. There's a whole plethora of data like sources that you could use. Do you have one in mind?
Mongo, I guess this is MongoDB, it says up there. Yeah.
Okay.
Or like RDF based databases. Yeah, but anyways, go on. Yeah.
So yeah, based on the previous slide, we have our data sources, our transformation sequence, our entity resolution itself, which involves the ingest queue and the sensing SDK and the relational database in here. And then comes the analytics, consume, visualizes, the aforementioned dashboarding and data store. Based on that, going back to data sources, a contributing data source will contain structured person or organizational information. And to your point, Matt, yeah, there's MongoDB, there's NoSQL, Neo4j, SQL, Hadoop, or you can use a file to feed into it, such as CSV or JSON. Dave and I were working on a little bit of JSON experimentation with this deployment. And from there, you can submit all records in the data source to the transform function. So once again, you have differing data sources that you can submit here. And after you've loaded it, then all of these data rows are submitted as transactions. Now, after that step comes the transform step. So then essentially through the generic entity specification, you have it mapped into sensing JSON. And if you could actually choose the ingest queue, and we chose Kafka in here, but you can use RabbitMQ, AWS, SQS. Those options are present in the deployment, but we chose to go forth with Kafka. Now, after the transformation sequence comes the entity resolution, and then which is the stream loader portion. It reads records off the ingest queue. So recall Kafka or RabbitMQ. Then from there, the sensing SDK is called where the entity resolution, AKA the magic, takes place. And the records are stored, and then from there, it's stored in a relational database. And in this case, we're using Postgres. Well, we don't have to be wedded to Postgres. You can use AWS Aurora, DB2, and MySQL. However, we used PostgreSQL at the request of the product manager of Sensing. And so we decided to go with that. But so from there, then results are stored from each entity resolution transaction, and then you can actually see it in the output queue. And then from there, you can consume and visualize. So then from the output queue, then you can actually call Neo4j or Elasticsearch or any data warehouse that you choose to use. And then the Sensing REST API is called from end user applications, providing such capabilities as user search, graph visualization, and case management dashboards. I'm a dashboard person. I used to work at Datadog, so that would be my preference. But again, no one has to be wedded to any specific middleware or anything. The best part about this is very customizable how you choose to approach it. So going from there, is there any questions so far, or do I have everyone still?
Sarah, I see you threw up a GitHub link, so I'll take a look at that. But yeah, and maybe you'll go into a bit more detail. So I'm thinking about this. So you're creating a JSON object out of a schema that you've developed, presumably that's doing some degree of heuristic and probabilistic matching and giving me probabilistic determinations as to my level of confidence around the patient identity.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Was there another question?
I was going to ask about the REST API. Do you publish any documentation around the REST API that like the types of data that you expose to the consuming applications?
I don't have that information. Are you referring to the Sensing generic entity specification? Because if that's the case, I do have that. It's not attached to this presentation, but I do happen to have that PDF if you'd be interested in me dropping that in chat.
I would, thank you.
All right, no worries. I'd be happy to do that. So let me just write myself a quick note so I don't forget it at the end of this presentation. Okay, so basically infrastructure for this proof of concept that was leveraged, I wanted to go kind of a cloud agnostic route. So I started off with Google Cloud Provider, as you see here, but it's in essence, the deployment is dependent upon a virtual machine, the OS and software, the octopus being Docker Compose, and the symbol beneath it being the operating system is Ubuntu Linux. So Ubuntu Linux 2004, and all this is specified in the GitHub link. So you can feel free to check that out. And it goes into more detail, such as the machine types that are used for the virtual machine, in addition to the scripts that are used to install everything on here. And from there, I decided to test this out on AWS, and it's very easy to deploy in AWS. I've created what's known as an instance template in Google Cloud, and in AWS it's known as a launch template. For those of you unfamiliar with those kinds of templates, it's basically a kind of a rubber stamp, to which you can stamp out copies of a virtual machine or a fleet of them and have them install whatever you want on it via a startup script. So in said startup script, there is like the Docker Compose, there's the Git repository for Sensing that's installed. Anything else that's required, such as an update for Ubuntu Linux, that's all set up. So essentially all you have to do is just press create VM and everything is installed on it. Everything is basically started up. And from there, then we have our Sensing demo. Also, I wanted to add that this was tested on a bare metal server, which is why I have it separate from cloud providers. And it was also successful. So that was very good news to hear that the deployment also worked on bare metal in addition to 2 of the larger cloud providers. So are there any questions or any ambiguity about this specific slide?
Not on this specific slide, but I was curious, and maybe you're going to cover this, but I'm just curious about the number of synthetic data sets you use for populating the schema model.
Okay, so in this case, there was a test suite that's deployed via Sensing, and it's from it's stored in an S3 bucket, and there are 5 in this specific demo. There's 5,000 distinct entries. That obviously we're not wedded to that. It was just it kind of came with the house. So obviously you can install your own, and this is where the data set and transformation part comes into play. In this case, I would recommend if you have any specific data, like disparate data sets that you wish to map to Sensing JSON, I would get you in touch with Laura from Sensing, the aforementioned product manager, and she will then in turn get you in touch with technical support, and then they will hook you up with everything you need to know to put your own data sets into Sensing, to feed it through there, and then visualize it on the other end. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, that's helpful. I guess I was just trying to get an idea about the sets of data you used for determining the schema in order to reach the level of confidence that you have in your patient matching.
Yeah, this was fed through Sensing, but again, there you can have custom data sets in terms of actual like patients. This is more customer focused, but this Sensing, that's the beauty of it. It's so flexible that you can actually use patient data, and the mapping is pretty easy. So I think that if I send the PDF, that might clear things up a little bit. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I was just gauging the temperature of the water with regards to the number of data sets you use for deriving the validity of the algorithms.
Yep, 5,000 in this test set.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions, I'll move to the next slide. So from here, you can feel free to check out the Sensing demo GitHub link that I've put up here. Now, Sensing white papers, I very much recommend. It really gives you a good idea as to like what makes Sensing tick. And if there are no questions, I am going to move straight into the demo.
One more dumb question. Is this an open source platform or Sensing strictly commercial provider?
This is an open source platform.
Okay.
I mean, it gets commercial when you want to do like 10 million plus, that you're gonna have to pay some money if you want to do millions of data sets. But in terms of it's a 100K, it's free, and it is open source. So I'm just going to briefly stop my share because I'm going to then move on to my terminal window, if that's okay with everyone. I just want to warn before I do a big transition here. Let's get to this, and I'm just going to share briefly. Dave, is there anything you want to add, or am I explaining things somewhat clearly?
Yeah, I would just add this, Sarah. keep in mind that what we're envisioning is many different data sources, like I said before, education or whatever it winds up being, that we're going to have to start matching across. So is this Jim St. Clair that's in education the same guy as Jay St. Clair in Medicaid and so forth? We see this as an issue headed our way.
Yes.
And if you look at things like the HIMSS presentation that we talked about just a moment ago, it would seem like we can gather our thoughts together. I know I've worked with Tom quite a bit in the past, to say, here are the issues that need to be solved. And we're not selling Sensing. We're basically saying it is a good engine for being able to handle various domains, multiple domains and so forth. So would love to have people work with us and refine what it is that we're going to need to have in terms of matching capabilities, entity resolution, and so forth. As we move forward, as we try and get more and more domains interacting with each other.
Yes. And going back to the architecture, yeah, that's basically the beauty of it. You can have a customer data set, a Medicaid data set, education data set. That all comes together to kind of paint a more complete picture. And from there, you can get, match a better match, or it doesn't match at all.
And a part of why Sarah went through and put those installation scripts in for Amazon and Google and bare metal is to kind of ease the path for people. Let's pick on Jim for a second, who wants to get in and kick the tires and do a little bit of investigation. So you don't have to go through all of the VMs and the various platforms and so forth. It's templates to get you started.
Yes, I wanted to make it. Sorry, Jim. Sorry that Dave's picking on you.
Let's pick on Jim.
So yeah, to Dave's point, that's part of my job as a cloud engineer, to make it easier for anyone who's using a deployment such as this one to get from point A to point B without having to do the myriad of steps to get between those 2 points. And to be perfectly honest, there are a few steps to do so. So I wanted to make it as much of a one-click solution as possible, or few clicks solution as possible, rather than going to your terminal and typing all this stuff up.
Well, and I'll up the ante a little bit. What I find very intriguing about it is that both the Patient ID Now Coalition, which I'm part of, and the ONC Fast Identity Tiger team, which I'm part of, which is now working on an implementation guide for HL7, are looking at patient matching it squarely in the face. And recognizing also that industry-wide, there aren't established tolerances, thresholds, acceptable levels of probabilistic matching and errors around patient matching and its relationship to FHIR schema. So to the extent that, since this is open source, if there's contributions you want to make back to schema recommendations for FHIR that we could build into the implementation guide, that would help codify not only a process that obviously benefits sensing, but just processes for schema-based probabilistic determinations of identity anyways.
Mm-hmm. One of the many wonderful things about sensing. And FYI, I don't work for
yourself a
Sensing.
volunteer, Jim.
Okie dokie.
Sorry, Jim. So, and again, full disclosure, I do not work for Sensing. I just find their product amazing. But in that vein, I am just going to continue with the demo. As you can see, we are in a terminal window. If anyone has any trouble seeing what's going on, I apologize. This is my favorite kind of terminal, the red sands. So I can actually switch out if anyone has any trouble seeing it. But if nobody does, I will just continue with my horrible color choices in terminal windows. So for the first step, if we want to search on a last name. So let's just say Williams. Oh, we got 2. Okay, so let's say compare, let's grab these entity IDs and this one.
Do I have to work out of the terminal window or do you have a GUI for it?
There's a GUI. Unfortunately, when I was trying to VNC in, it was incredibly slow and it was almost non-responsive. I think my VNC software is a little bit outdated. So in the spirit of this demo, I didn't want anyone to tear their hair out waiting for me to do that. But yes, it is. There are GUI windows, and I specify that in the GitHub repository. You can use localhost, and there's a whole bunch of ports if you were in your virtual machine, for instance, that allow you to do so through your internet browser. So you don't have to do this. I'm a terminal girl. I like the terminal. So
Good on you.
My jam. So in this, we're comparing these two specific entities for the name Williams, and it actually shows what this differs on. So for instance, you have entities like passport number or social security number, which you can only have one of. You can't exactly have multiple, like you can have multiple addresses or multiple surnames if you were married a couple of times. But in this case, it tends to pick on specific things like driver's license, passport, SSN to form a better picture. And so you see there's a match score here of 100. There's no ambiguity. But if I were to search something like search B, which honestly, not the last name we're looking for, but it's in the data set. So you see, we have a match score of 100 for the first entry, but the second one is 85, showing us that maybe these are not the droids we're looking for. If we compare these two, we'll see, oh, it's the same gender, all right, it's the same test data set. And keep in mind, data sources, this is one specific data set, but if you have multiple data sets, they'll show up here. So it'll be like customer, education, Medicaid, going back to once again, the architecture slide where you have your different data sets. This is just one, but it can come across multiple data sets. So here you see that, again, not the same person, but the match score is differing here. Only one instance of Smith, match score of 100. So let's try this. We have 4 H's. Okay. So I'm sorry.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay.
I have a quick question. What is the match score? I mean, I would think that 100 match score, it sounds like 100% confidence, but evidently in the example above, you had 2 different people.
I don't know, and I don't know. Can I get a bit more detail about it? Actually, hey, Mary, I am on a conference call. I'm on a Zoom meeting. Would it be okay if I called you back in about 30 minutes? Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yeah, in this case, match score, it does like match up. I was actually trying to, so in a previous demo I had given, it for some reason did not appear here. There was a character, Robert Smith, and the match, it was the same essentially across all 4 rows, except for one bit of information, which was a bit different. I believe it was driver's license. And that came with a match score of 97 because it was almost certain that it was the same Robert or Bob Smith, but there was that one bit of difference. So the match score, yeah, does kind of point to the confidence that this is in fact the person that you are looking for.
Let me ask the hard question. Did the 5,000 contain enough dissimilar demographic and socioeconomic information to differentiate if there are natural probabilistic trends that are impacted by certain SDOH factors?
In this specific data set, no. However, you would be able to construct your own truth sets against that.
Sarah, in the previous example you gave, I think it was the first example, it had 100% match set with people who had different genders and different addresses. And I think maybe it's further towards the top, or there you go. Yeah, Williams. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So you have different addresses, different login IDs, or I guess there's no address. Yeah, different login ID, different gender. And yet it was saying is there 100% match?
For these specific entries, like maybe it's not the best example, so my apologies. Like I said, for some reason, the entry that I was using before didn't show up in this one for Robert Smith. And I can actually kind of send the screen cap for that. But yeah, in this case, it's different entries, but they're certain that these in fact are the people that they claim to be.
Oh, so you're talking about you're validating that those people are who they say they are, but they could still be different people.
Yes.
Okay, so there's proof of identity insurance, right?
Mhm.
That, like we were checking this against some kind of external record of Williams's address, an external record of their passport or whatever, right? That's one thing.
Yes, it's one thing you can pick on. Yes.
It's not the same thing as patient matching, which is like actually matching two records that you're sure they are who they say they are, and you're saying, are they the same person? Which is the second question. So that's where I was getting confused.
Oh, okay. But
so
sorry.
Proof of identity versus identity matching, we're matching two records, right?
Yes. Originally, sensing was used for fraud detection. So it was like, are you indeed who you say you are? But then this can extend to trying to match up, to like going back to the example of, I'm in the database 4 times. I've lived at different addresses. I've gotten married and I might have changed my name, but I am still the same person I say I am, and that the match score in this case would be 100 across all 4 entries.
So it seems like for each combination of records, I would imagine that because these are 2 different things, there'd be a match score for, yes, Matt Bishop, who lives at this address, this yada yada yada. He is who he says he is. We know that this is a real Matt Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And then there'd be a separate score for matching me against some other record, right?
Like
matching
so
together, right? Wouldn't that be a separate thing?
I'm trying to think. Like, okay, I might be misunderstanding your question. So, like, for instance, if there's a Matt Bishop of 72 Evergreen Lane, and then there's another Matt, with like Social Security 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. There's another Matt Bishop in Tallahassee, Florida, and they have a different Social Security number. It's I think I might be losing the thread here. Sorry.
Let me give you a good example, right?
Okay.
Let's say you have a very good record of me. 100% you can match this against some kind of external record, external identity service.
Mm-hmm.
You have tons of data on me for that one particular record, but then you have another record and it is me, but probabilistically you only have the Matt Bishop, the name and address, right? And so one is the proof that this record is a Matt Bishop, and then the other is, hey, we're comparing these 2 Matt Bishops. One has a horrible data, the other has tons of data. How sure are we that these 2 records are the same? So I guess that's the how sure we are that the 2 records are the same was what I'm looking for.
Exactly.
Okay. So basically from there, there would have to be other attributes attached to your name. Feeding, like, for instance, just the name and the address, I'm not sure if that would fly in a database system. So there would have to be some other like a primary key
Right.
functioning as like a driver's license functioning as a primary key or social security, then from there, from that specific entity can be drawn an inference that, okay,
Right.
the addresses are different and a lot of the other information is different, but you have the driver's license or the passport or the social is the same thing. So from there, you know, we can deduce that Matt Bishop or Matthew Bishop of Tallahassee, Florida, and Matt Bishop of Schoharie, New York are the same.
Right.
In fact, Matt Bishop.
Right. So Rand did a study on this problem, and I think they found something like you need, it's either 4 or 5 data points to get, I think, like 95 or 99%. Thanks, Jim.
I'll go with that,
confidence.
Matt, but I think it was 5 data points for 85%.
Oh, is it 85% confidence?
I think so. I was actually Googling right now because I was part of the HIMSS patient identification task force about 5-6 years ago, and we were working off of that study that you referenced to.
Yeah, it's so what I would, in a solution like patient matching, what I would love, I don't know if this is something Sensing does or whatever, but what I'd love to have is something that could tell me based on some kind of qualified probabilistic research, right? Okay, we know that the cell phone data, your mobile phone is incredibly reliable. So we're going to weight that. We're going to give you an actual confidence interval of how confident we are that these two records are the same based on the type of data you have available, which will differ depending on, like Dave is saying, the multiple different domains you're accessing that data from. Is that something that Sensing does?
I believe, I'm trying to think. Yes, they do, given that they have a principle-based method that, so like for each entity attribute you have, there are basic behaviors such as frequency, exclusivity, and stability. And for the specific entity, like date of birth, at my previous job, I shared the same month and day, birthday, not year, but if a date that can happen, people can have the same date of birth. But like, for instance, an address is shared by a few people, date of birth can be shared by many people. A social security number is only used by one entity. So frequency is one of the measures they use. Exclusivity, going back to the social security number, again, this is only exclusive to one person can have one social security number. That's it. You can't have multiple because then that's identity theft. And stability is another facet of this, where does this change over the person's lifetime? Does their date of birth and their social security number change? And all these kind of attributes combined tell the more complete story. Like, does that make sense? Or
yeah, well, I would also say that, remember what we're trying to do here is start looking at what the solutions could be. So the questions that we're getting, I think, are really insightful. The goal is, can we get a configuration set up that we can actually define some proof of concepts and so forth? And then, of course, get Sensing on to answer the really tough questions to make sure we're not spreading information that isn't correct on their product. But the goal is figure out a configuration where we can do a proof of concept, identify people in this group that would be interested, and I'm hearing people that are interested in this, get Sensing on the line. And in the end, I would love to see if this couldn't be a part of the HIMSS interoperability showcase that we described a little bit ago with Tom and so forth.
So unfortunately, today's point, I wasn't able to get a representative from Sensing here today, but for future reference, if anyone is interested in kind of getting the group together and speaking to a representative of Sensing, I would be happy to set that up so they can actually give a more in-depth dive than I could. So
Yeah,
I would
and
actually welcome that for anyone here who has, really wants to take a deep dive into it. I would love to set that up.
Yeah, and I have to publicly apologize because Matt's explanation on identification was what I was trying to inquire about with regards to probabilistic determinations. Because unless there's some sort of framework, be it that RAND study or something else that says, I need name, address, birth date, and social security number and blood type, for 5 characteristics, and then use that as a framework. And then in the data evaluation, ETL deduplication process, have a schema that says, well, I got something that says Elvis Presley, which I assume is a name. I've got something that says Graceland, and I'm assuming that's an address, and then
Yes.
apply all of that to come up with that probabilistic determination.
Yes. I would, like I said, I would be happy to set up a meeting with a representative of Sensing to really go into a much deeper dive than I am here, and can explain it, a lot better.
And also help in defining, for us to define what is a multi-domain entity resolution problem that really reflects what it is that we're going to be running into.
Yep, exactly.
It sounds like we have some additional opportunities, both from a working group perspective. If you could invite additional people in to work with you on this, and also in terms of future presentations.
Super.
Yes. Next time I will actually hope to have a Sensing representative on with me so they can explain it better. But yeah, this, are there any other questions I have or you have before I kind of stop the share? None?
I guess I'm just looking for kind of a, is the match score as I'm interpreting, what I'm hearing from you is, this is a score based on someone has made an assertion of their identity.
Mhm.
I am Matt Bishop. Here's information about me, right?
Yes.
How confident are we that this is actually the Matt Bishop, right?
Mhm.
And is that essentially what a match score is? We're essentially any kind of assertion of identity. Anybody who's entering data anywhere. That's what they mean by a match score. Because when I think of a match score, you have four entities there, right?
Mhm.
There would be a match score for every combination of those 4. That's what when I think of match score, that's what I think of. Does that, as opposed to like an identity assertion score or identity validation score. I'm sorry if I'm kind of getting caught up on the semantics here, but I just want to make sure I have it right.
No, I think what you're saying is valid, Matt. What we don't want to do is mislead you.
Okay.
So, I would suggest again, Sensing has been giving us great support. Sarah's working with Laura hand in glove. And what I'd like to do is reach out with Brian, Jim, yourself, others to say, hey, here's something we could do within the next couple of months in terms of a proof of concept. Get Sensing on the line, get some of your basic questions answered, and see if we can put together that proof of concept.
I think what's critical is that we should be able to document a blueprint that specifies how standards can be used for gaining, for determining appropriate patient match, and then specify how those standards might invoke something like a proprietary solution like Sensing, or let's say, an open source implementation of an EMPI from Happy or whomever, so that what we're presenting to the world is not specifically a proprietary solution, but something based on standards that could be implemented either open source or proprietary.
Exactly right, Brian. And
The
we've got a route to
opportunity
do that through HL7
for
too.
everyone.
Yes.
We might want to bring in somebody from the direct trust world, because they really focus on, you can issue a direct address to a patient, but they go through a process of verifying identity to what's NIST level, NIST level 3 identity assertion, which sounds like what the sensing is describing as something comparable to the match score.
Matt, actually, I'll respectfully disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
Well, and I hate to do that in such a way as to dismiss what you're thinking, because you're thinking right. So I'll present my challenge. I have an identity solution. We are looking at ways to create an identity solution credential that involves IAL level 2 to IAL level 3 validation. Now I present myself as an IAL level 2 identity. I need to be matched to make sure that they don't cut off the wrong leg or I get the wrong drug. And that's where the sensing matching comes in, where say I have to go to one doctor on Tuesday, another doctor at another building on Wednesday, and I fall and break my leg on Thursday. And in those 3 instances, what's the probabilistic determination for patient matching across disparate systems based on, even if I can present a credential that says I'm IA level 2 validated, I need to match up with the right records to make sure that I don't get the wrong drug.
So no, I think what I meant by mentioning direct is that they're certainly not the full solution. They would just be addressing one partial part of this identity matching process. They wouldn't be doing the matching. They'd be doing the identity verification. You still need a matching standard that direct trust would not be, the leader on here. They just happen to be, when they issue a direct address to a patient, that patient can go through an identity verification process. But once you verify the identity, there's a separate step of actually matching that record to, some other record there to determine whether they're the same. So I just wanted to be clear that I recognize that those are 2 separate steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, sir. And I'd even, if we're interested in that case, I would invite my colleagues from LexisNexis, and of course they're using proprietary systems, but they do tremendous data set crunching across identity to support ID proofing, and they have, I think, 4 state asset verification systems. So when you sign up for Medicaid and you attest to what your benefits are, their back-end asset verification systems find every record out there to make sure that you don't own 10,000 acres in Montana when you're applying for Medicaid in California.
Fascinating.
Well, folks, it's now 5:23, and we're well beyond our generally hoped for 5 o'clock, and well, maybe it's 5:15 end time.
My apologies, Brian.
No, that's quite all right.
Discussion,
You obviously presenting something of great interest to everybody.
Well, thank you. And with that, I actually attached the drive link. I made the link public for anyone who was interested in seeing the Sensing generic entity specification. So that can explain the mapping of specific entities, again, a lot better than I could. So proof is in the pudding or the Google Drive link in this case.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Exactly what I was looking for.
You're welcome. No worries.
There's clearly a lot more to discuss around this. I would suggest that folks follow through in inviting folks to perhaps a working group meeting around patient matching and patient identity. I'm sure that there are folks that are going to be willing to participate in that discussion. And that then that group can figure out, well, what is the next demonstration that really ought to happen?
So,
Is that reasonable, folks?
to your point, I'm sorry, the deliverable here would, is anyone interested in a potential workshop in this case with sensing? So I can kind of start the ball rolling on that.
I'd say absolutely. And I'll also include the Patient ID Now Coalition, which has about 30 representatives to include AHIMA and HIMSS and a few others. I mean, we just wrote a national strategy framework on this, so it would be great to discuss.
Oh, exactly.
This is great. Okay. Yeah, this is awesome.
Well, I don't have Jim's bona fides, so I'd be happy to join.
Everyone is welcome to the workshop. No worries. I mean, this is, I'm really happy that there's interest in this. Yeah, thank you for your ears and eyes, everyone. I really appreciate your patience with me during the presentation.
And thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, this
Thank
was
you.
a really great presentation.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Amanda, is there anything that we need to cover before we close out the meeting?
No, I don't believe so.
Well, we will see everybody 4 o'clock next Wednesday.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. And yeah, we should approach Daniel about the HIMSS interoperability event next year. It almost seems like we've got enough time to do something significant between now and then. And it's always good to have a deadline that you're marching towards.
Sounds like a great suggestion.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, folks, happy summer.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have a
Brian.
good one, everyone.
Take care, all.
Bye.